Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the Welcome to Frantastic Friday. I am still Francesca Fiorentini. What's going on? I feel like it's been forever since Tuesday, because so much has happened, so much news. Donald Trump tried to use the Arlington Cemetery as a photo op, and some very, very wonderful person was like, you can't do that. And now he's just sharing sexist memes all over the place. There's a lot that's been happening. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz had their first interview since being the nominees for president and vice president. And I want to get into most of that. So if you're watching, it's your fucking lucky day, because this is where you have to be. If you're listening, obviously it's your lucky day because you press play, and you don't have to be alone anymore. You can be with me in the news. Remember, people, the Frantastic Friday was just like an added extra little fun, and not as fun as Wednesdays, but it was an added show. So if you feel so inclined, support this show, patreon.com/bitchuationroom, and get access to the fun stories that we usually do on a Wednesday. And this past Wednesday, we did talk about a man who is running AI slash himself as a meat avatar for mayor of a poor little town in Wyoming. So that was fun. There we talked, what else? Christ. It's been only a day, but there's more stories. The point is, patreon.com/bitchuationroom. Welcome, John, to the innermost cabal of the Frantifa. We will tell you how to perfect the handshake. There is a somersault in it once you are inducted, but I'm sure you'll get it down, no problem. Again, you can also tip the show, TBR-Live on Venmo, TBR Live on Cash App. And if you also want access to all those bonus episodes, you can become a member on YouTube or Twitch if that's your flavor. Okay? I don't discriminate, but I do prefer Patreon. Just going to put that out there. But let's get after it, guys. Last night, CNN's Dana Bash conducted Tim Walz and Kamala Harris's first interview since becoming the party's nominee. And initially, I will say this. When I heard that Harris, let's call her by her last name, not do the sexist thing, that Harris was going to give her first interview alongside Tim Walz, I thought that it was a little bit of a coward move, not gonna lie. A little cowardly. Felt like, okay, so you can't handle, you need someone to deflect, maybe. But then as I thought about it more and as I saw them there together, which, by the way, terrible framing, and we'll get into that, but I realized that this was actually a really good move. Yes, not only is it a move that Donald Trump and JD Vance have done, that candidates do all the time, very much a campaign move, but that it allowed Kamala Harris to define her own candidacy on her own terms, which is ironic because in some of her answers, she very much showed that she just wanted to regurgitate what Biden has already done and actually the failed policies that Biden has implemented. So, but on a turning the page, on a look, let's be honest with you. Trump is a tainted brand, but so is Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a tainted brand. He's old. A lot of people think he didn't handle the economy well, even though the economy is pretty freaking good. And this was a chance for her to basically do her own thing, go her own way. And I think it was a good look. I think actually at the end of the day, it was important because without it, her interview becomes more about what she has or hasn't done in the last 4 years, which is interesting because I think a lot of us, if we were asked, what the hell does a vice president do? We'd be like, I don't know, goes to Little League games and meets with leaders of unknown Eastern European countries that nobody has time for. Like, let's be honest, not a whole lot. So I do think that there is something both missed, whether it's mainstream news or it's, leftists who are like, oh, Kamala Harris has been like the right hand, at the right hand of Joe Biden, is the hand of the king. No, she has not been. That is usually never the case unless you're Dick Cheney. I mean, if you're Dick Cheney, I mean, that dude had a plan. He implemented his plan and Halliburton stock went up. Congratulations. But not everyone is as Machiavellian. So it's and I want to get into some of that today because we're going to look at the interview and then I want to do a little bit of fact checking and soul searching specifically around the issue of immigration. Because I do think that Kamala Harris is, whatever the calling her the border czar versus what she actually was trying to address root causes of migration is very different. And I think it's interesting to see, like, what has the Biden administration done around immigration? That, and we are going to get guests on in the future to talk about that. Speaking of which, we were going to have a really big guest today, but that person is canceled on me and / on my S list. And you don't know who they are, and you won't know who they are unless you're a patron or you're a member on YouTube, in which case you can watch it back and be like, oh, right, that was supposed to be the guest. But anyway, I'll take it part by part. I will say one part I didn't clip that I really liked that shows you that Kamala Harris is trying to do something different than just be a Biden surrogate, which is what she's ultimately been asked to do for a really long time, is that she was asked, is Bidenomics working? Okay, so you believe Bidenomics is working. And Kamala Harris, instead of saying yes, was basically like, what I think is working is, and then she listed the things that have been involved in the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Lowering the cost of insulin, obviously the child tax credits, which then lapsed because Joe Biden could not step to Joe Manchin and didn't want to, step to the filibuster more specifically. But that I thought was really an interesting tell because she's saying, she didn't even say, yeah, Bidenomics is working. Even though in other moments of the interview, she lavishes praise on Joe Biden. He's got a good character. Okay. But not saying Bidenomics is working, I read more as this is about Kamala Nix. You know what I'm saying? This is about the economy. I'm going to get it soon. But you know what I mean? Like, this is about me. This is my time to shine. I'm not going to take the Bidenomics label. In fact, maybe I didn't even like it in the first place. And the last thing I'll say before I stop with these many overarching digressions and disclaimers is Kamala Harris crushed this interview if you are a centrist. She crushed this interview if you are a former Republican voter / suburban woman who thinks, sometimes the leftists are socialists. She crushed the interview. She crushed the interview in terms of being cagey about where she really stands. And ultimately, I literally don't know. I don't know where she stands on immigration. I don't know where she stands on climate change. I don't even really know where she stands on Gaza, even though we'll get into what she said. I don't know who this person is. I actually think I don't know if she knows who she is. This is a good thing. This is a little bit of a scary thing because we know, if there's a jump ball of a person, usually the person who's able to tip that ball in their favor are, say it with me, billionaires. That's right. Money speaks much louder than the people. However, I do think there is a real Kamala Harris somewhere deep down in there who might be like, Joe Biden was a terrible fucking president, okay? Yeah, we were in the Oval and he said, let's go to the Oval. And we were there already. And I was like, is anyone else seeing this? Is anyone else? Okay. Am I the only one? Like, she might think that Joe Biden was the worst president. I don't know, but the goal of being the hallmark of a good politician is she's fucking stone-faced. She is able to, first of all, answer sentences, which honestly, I think for a lot of the blue MAGA or the people mad at me for criticizing Kamala Harris on literally anything is just like, she can finish a sentence. Please stop, okay? And it's true. You hear her and you're like, oh God. Oh, I hated that answer, but what a cogent, terrible answer that was. So anyway, let's get after it. I want to start maybe with the least consequential part of all this, but where she talks about, just gives you a sense of like where she's coming at some of the right-wing attacks on her and her character, which I thought it was interesting. Take a look.
But what I want to ask you about is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any?
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Okay. That's it. Same old tired playbook. You just happen to turn black. Now, there's a number. First of all, when I first saw this, I was like, I actually think this is kind of brilliant. That being said, I'm not a Black American. And this moment, along with another moment, really drove home the fact that this candidate is not trying to talk about race. This candidate is like, oh, remember Obama? Remember how he won? Yeah, I'm going to do the same. I will make nobody uncomfortable by my existence and mentioning my race and my gender. And you know, obviously Obama eventually did mention his race when he said Trayvon Martin could have been him. And everyone was like, what? You? What do you mean? You're black? Oh! Right? Like that happened. But Kamala Harris really doesn't want to go there. And I think not even stooping to address it. Because how the fuck do you address it? I've always been, because unlike Barack Obama, who did show his birth certificate of all fucking things after being, you know, hounded by, of all people, Donald effing Trump, Kamala's like, not gonna do it. Sorry. Anyway, next question. Kind of a boss move. Like, I'm not gonna boss bitch her, but like, damn. You know what I'm saying? Talk about not taking the bait when the media is like, all we are is bait. Bait. So that was really interesting. Now, finally, on this point about identity, which I think is maybe the most lightweight piece of this, but I think it's interesting. And the reason I say, like, I don't know how Black Americans feel about this strategy, you know, you all tell me. But at the end, she is asked about this like iconic photo of her speaking with her granddaughter watching her, or no, her niece watching her, I think. And she's like, you know, what did it, you know, this went viral. What did it mean to you? And the answer is very much like, as the first Black female nominee of the Democratic Party, this is a historic occasion. I hope my candidacy is an inspiration to young girls, and specifically young Black girls who are always told their place is not in power. Whatever, however you want to spin it, however beautiful way you can honestly speak about a beautiful moment, did not engage. She said, yeah, I saw it, and I was very humbled. That's it, people. I didn't clip it. I apologize. She said, I was humbled. This person is not trying to talk about race, is not trying to talk about gender, is running in a general election against a bunch of douchebags who, given enough rope, are hanging themselves with it, and she is minding every P and every Q in this racist ass country that bristles at the mention of someone being a different race, right? Even someone mentioning differences among us, Americans get all uppity about. Now you made it racial. She knows that. She knows that. So interesting strategy here. Very interesting strategy. Now, there's a bunch of other moments, but I did want to turn to okay, let's just go to immigration. I apologize. There were good moments from the interview, and I didn't clip a lot of them, but I thought it was cogent. I thought it was good. I thought she, she heralded obviously the economic victories of the Biden administration coming out of the pandemic. I thought, she was clear. She was, I don't know if inspiring, but she did the goddamn job. So I apologize I didn't clip the good stuff, but in case you accuse me of not saying there was any, there were. There were lots of good things, and it wasn't that long of an interview, which I think was maybe the best part. Now let's go to the problems. So here she is on immigration, and it's a longer wind up here, and there's more piece by piece, and I do want to dig into what does she think about immigration, right? Like what are we in for when it comes to the Biden, the Harris Walz administration? Should they?
Another issue, big one.
Should they be in power? We know what Trump's is, and apparently this is corroborated by some research that I did earlier, that Trump's immigration policies were literally just Stephen Miller on the phone screaming at different officials, right? I said, lock up the Guatemalans. Like that, and then he would just hang it up. And then would go back to going like, pew, 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 pew. Oh, no. You crossed the border. Now you have to come with me. Oh, right? Anyway, here's Dana Bash.
One is immigration. Mm-hmm. As vice president, you were tasked with addressing the root causes of migration in southern countries and
northern part of Central America.
The northern part of
okay, that's my favorite part. We're gonna go back a little bit. You were tasked with dealing with immigration in southern countries. Okay, look, I've been in the interviewer's seats, and I know sometimes you don't get the words right, but just goes to show that even the news media doesn't really know what she was doing, and also is pretty racist and like lumps like southern countries, the Latins
in southern countries and
northern part of Central America.
The northern part of
northern part of Central America. She's like, yeah, yes, and it was the Northern Triangle specifically. So Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. That's that. In fact, and when they both came into office, Biden and Harris, that's where the majority of immigration was coming from. It then changed, and we'll dig into that. But I just thought that was really interesting. Yeah. Anyway, you're getting it wrong, but okay.
Of Central America that affects the southern border of the U.S. Mm-hmm. During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Well, first,
okay, so I need everyone to understand that answer is bullshit. That question is bullshit. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait till 3 years to implement any kind of asylum changes? They waited because they were busy continuing Trump policies of denying people asylum and deporting them based under what was called Title 42. So everyone, we're going to dig into this, but I just want you to know that setup of like, why did you wait so long? Now, obviously, Harris does not want to say, in fact, we continued Trump policies. They don't want to say that, but that's exactly what they did. So the question is completely false, number one.
First of all, the root causes work that I did as vice president, that I was asked to do by the president, has actually resulted in a number of benefits, including historic investments by American businesses in that region. The number of immigrants coming from that region has actually reduced since we began that work. But I will say this, that Joe Biden and I and our administration worked with members of the United States Congress on an immigration issue that is very significant to the American people and to our security, which is the border. And through bipartisan work, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, a bill was crafted, which we supported, which I support. And Donald Trump got word of this bill that would have contributed to securing our border, and because he believes that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, don't put it forward. He killed the bill. A border security bill that would have put 1,500 more agents on the border. And let me tell you something, the border...
1,500 more agents to play Candy Crush and get paid off by coyotes and drug runners. Fine.
Patrol endorsed the bill. And I'm sure in large part because they knew they were working around the clock, and 1,500 more agents would help them. That bill would have allowed us to increase seizures of fentanyl. Ask any community in America that has been devastated by fentanyl what passing that bill would have done to address their concern and a pain that they've experienced.
So you would push that legislation again. I just want to
Not
ask
only
about...
push it, I will make sure that it comes to my desk and I would sign it.
Just one other question about something that you said in 2019 when you first ran. There was a debate. You raised your hand when asked whether or not the border should be decriminalized. Do you still believe that?
I believe there should be consequence. We have laws that have to be followed and enforced that address and deal with people who cross our border illegally, and there should be consequence. And let's be clear, in this race, I'm the only person who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns, drugs, and human beings. I'm the only person in this race who actually served a border state as Attorney General to enforce our laws, and I would enforce our laws as president going forward. I recognize the problem.
Okay, so whatever you make of what the substance, this is definitely a masterclass in whatever you see, what you want to see. She ultimately avoided answering the question, and she looks tough. And I think that line about she better pull this line out when she talks to Donald Trump and saying, I'm the only one who is the AG of a border state, California. Good line. But let's take it a little, part by part. Starting with the last part. Whether or not she raised her hand to say that the border should be not decriminalized, but it should be a civil offense, not a criminal offense. You're not an automatic felon because you crossed the border, right? And here she is back during those debates in 2019, basically raising her hand and saying that. And so let's take a look. I don't know why there's no sound.
On this stage last night on the topic of decriminalization of the border. If you'd be so kind, raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross a border without documentation. Can we keep a hand?
My favorite part about the hands being raised is that Biden is like kind of raising his hand, and so is Bernie, but both of them are like, but I'd like to say something. Like Bernie's like, yeah, but I'm trying to talk. Like I'm raising my hand to speak, but a little bit they did this a lot. Also, the hand raise thing was so fucking dumb. But like Biden's like, Biden definitely does not agree. He just wants to talk. And Bernie's like half agree, half want to talk. But here we go. Here comes Kamala. Very proudly, Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand, hand all the way up. No question here on that issue. So yeah, she did say that. But that doesn't mean there's no punishment for crossing the border. It doesn't mean that, that a civil offense still isn't an offense, right? So it's just not, it doesn't make you a criminal. And so she, in that interview, I mean, you could still, Who knows? Who knows who the fuck she actually is? But she could uphold that view of not making it like a felony offense to cross the border and saying I'm going to enforce laws, right? Like those things are compatible in a lot of this flip-flopping. And it is absolutely true, and Dana Bash called her on this, and we'll talk about it in a second, that she's now running in a general. She was running against the likes of Bernie Sanders in the primary. Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, and in sort of, not as large of a part, but in some degree, pulled the entire primary to the left and really made people contend with these front runners. And let's be fucking real. Bernie was a fucking front runner, you guys. Biden wasn't a front runner, never was. No how, never been. Only until Obama was like, through the combined forces of centrists, we can oust the man who actually wants to deliver something for the American people, right? That's how Biden became the front runner. So putting that aside, let us go into her, like what Kamala Harris was responsible for, and also what Biden was doing and has been doing this entire time, because it's something that's really important to get right. And I think the main thing, overarching thing, is Kamala Harris obviously is correct that this bipartisan border bill, which basically eliminates the ability to seek asylum in this country, which is under international law, although since when do we follow that? And also US law, we have to abide by that. We have to allow people to seek asylum. It is in part the reason that a lot of this has been hung up in the courts. There have been countersuits, as some chatters are pointing out, from Republican governors, and back and forth, because immigration is a politically toxic hot potato that is so broken and stretches across so many different agencies, and nobody has the cojones to actually take it on. And certainly nobody has the cojones to defend the human rights of people who are seeking a better life, either economically or, being straight up chased out by cartels and gangs and whatever the hell else is happening, and corruption that's happening in their country. Kamala Harris was tasked with, as she said, going after the root causes of migration, specifically in the Northern Triangle in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, right? And so this New Yorker piece by Jonathan Blitzer from July of this year, called "The Real Story of Kamala Harris's Record on Immigration," it's fairly sympathetic. So I'm going to get into the negative, but I did think it had some really good points that I wanted to bring up. So part of me was like, why would Joe Biden stick Kamala Harris with this task? That sounds so thankless, so difficult, but apparently he thought it was a good thing. Biden himself, as vice president, as Jonathan writes, had traveled to Central America during Barack Obama's second term as part of a broader initiative to address border arrivals at their original point. Quote, he was not just proud of it, he thought it made a real difference. And it did, Zuniga said. Zuniga is a former State Department official, Ricardo Zuniga. As President Biden assigned a similar role to Harris, he saw it as a good thing. Andrea Flores, a border expert at the NSC under Biden, told me that made sense in 2014 and 2015. It didn't make sense in 2021. All eyes were on the border. It was a day-to-day, on-the-ground operational emergency. She was set up to fail because by now the issue was about so much more than root causes. Yeah, by now, and remember, this was the moment that every Republican and their mother was, and still do, was going to the border to stage their fucking live podcast, right? and like make it a point to be like, look at all these migrants. I mean, CNN itself, speaking to Dana Bash's network, was staging, boatloads of migrants crossing the Rio Grande so they could film it, right? Like everyone was biting off this apple and trying to make a political pawn out of people who are just trying to survive. So just, putting that out there. If anyone saw the looming political peril at the time, it was Harris herself. Dealing with, quote, root causes was, by definition, slow and strategic work, essential from a policy perspective, but politically inopportune. Positive results could take many years to materialize. Harris was resigned to the assignment. Jonathan Martin and Alexander Burns write in This Will Not Pass, their book about the early days of the Biden presidency. She would take on the Northern Triangle, traveling to Central America, negotiating with governments there. But under no circumstances did she want to be branded Biden's border czar. At a meeting with the president and members of the Congressional Black Caucus that April, Harris corrected Biden when he said she'll do a hell of a job on immigration. Her brief, she added, was the Northern Triangle, not immigration. I'm just doing root causes. It's above my pay grade. Definitely not on me. Okay. This is everyone's joint failure, not just mine. Okay. I can't fix it alone. Like, I love that. I love her correcting him and him being like, yeah, you've got immigration now. And if you fail, it'll be all your fault. This will be perfect. I will never have to step aside unless my whole brain quits on me, but that'll never happen. Good thinking, Joe. Harris's most immediate dilemma when she took on the role was that there were few leaders in the region who she could talk to. Y'all know how I love to talk about Latin America. I find this very interesting. The president of Honduras at the time, Juan Orlando Hernandez, was under investigation by the Drug Enforcement Agency. He's now serving a 45-year sentence in a U.S. prison for drug trafficking. Not exactly the partner you need. Nayib Bukele, we've talked about him, the authoritarian leader of El Salvador, who had had strong relationships with the Trump administration, was increasingly at odds with Biden over corruption in the Salvadoran government and a pattern of anti-democratic behavior. That left the regime of Alejandro Giammattei, Giammattei of Guatemala, a former surgeon whose conservative administration was notorious for its ties to special interests. In fact, Guatemala's attorney general had been targeting prosecutors and judges who were involved in the state's own fight against corruption, in many instances arresting and jailing them. Nearly 24 of the country's top legal minds were eventually forced into exile. So, not an easy time to partner with these heads of state, because they're all, in one form or another, corrupt or authoritarian or straight up drug traffickers. Now, let me just say, not the job I'd want either. So she knows this going in. This is interesting. In May, 2021, a month before Harris was due to travel to Guatemala, she convened a meeting in Washington with a group of exiled jurists, all women, who'd been involved in combating corruption in Guatemala. Quote, at this table are attorneys who have prosecuted drug traffickers and organized crime, Harris said. At this table are judges who have advocated for an independent judiciary and the rule of law. She added that injustice is the root cause of migration and that corruption is preventing people from getting basic services. One of the lawyers in attendance was Thelma Aldana, a former attorney general of Guatemala who was forced out of the country as she prepared to launch a presidential campaign of her own. I left the meeting with Harris very optimistic. Aldana told me she was a prosecutor too, and we understood each other well. Now, as someone who believes that the root causes of the immigration crisis, whatnot, is not only local corruption, but is also the United States' posturing and positioning, specifically when it comes to what? The war on drugs. And yes, also the number and amount of weapons that get trafficked from the U.S. side of the border to the Mexican side of the border and all the southern countries that Dan Abash is referring to. We talked about that a couple Fridays ago with Yohan Grillo. But it's an interesting place to start to be like, I want to support politically, being able to set a different course so that, again, fish rots from the head down. Like, I want to align myself with people who are trustworthy in these administrations. It's a very admirable thing to take on. I had no idea that she was doing this. So I think it's very interesting. According to Jacobson and Zuniga, however, the lines Harris was supposed to deliver. Oh, sorry. So she goes to Guatemala and does the "do not come" speech. You guys remember that? Do not come. Do not come. This was her conversations with the president of Guatemala, Giammattei, and they were chillier. What is his name? Jonathan writes. He regarded the anti-corruption investigations as a tool of the overzealous left and paid lip service to the idea of cooperating with the United States on migration. Biden, he said, needed to, quote, send more of a clear message to prevent people from leaving. This was precisely the message that the White House wanted Harris to deliver when she traveled to Guatemala the following month. I mean, this cuts both ways. This sounds like a massive abdication of this president's power to be like, you guys need to tell them not to go. Well, what about you? Like, what are you doing to make your country an easier place to live? But also, and let's just be real. I'm not going to be blind to the fact that when you interview migrants either on the border or en route to the border, when there is a Democratic president, it is true that the word goes out that's like, oh, hey, we might not die. Like, oh, hey, we've got more of a human, not a fascist robot in power in the White House in the United States. There's a chance my family and I might make it. That much is true. That much is absolutely true. And it may be turning and may have turned with this administration, who, again, is trying to be more to the right or as to the right as Trump is. So I just want to, name that. So that's when we saw that Harris saying, do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our borders. In a statement, a single line in a 10-minute speech prompted criticism from both ends of the political spectrum. Conservatives derided her as feckless, progressives as heartless. According to Jacobson and Zuniga, however, the lines Harris was supposed to deliver got truncated in the press's coverage. The part about how migrants shouldn't come north was the line we suggested she delivered, Zuniga said. The whole message was, don't come, you'll get turned around. We're working on making things better so you don't have to make the dangerous trip to the border. But he added, you couldn't have subtlety in an environment where any messaging was misconstrued. The White House's approach to dealing with migration at the border was still undefined, with various different factions inside the administration competing for influence. As a result, there was no clear script for Harris to follow. There were things she couldn't say, Jacobson said. She was sent down there without the full set of tools. And then Andrea Flores said it was confusing. Why would she be sent to the border? Because then she did go to the border. After doing that interview with Lester Holt, she did go to the border. But then it was like, wait a minute, why is she on the border? Because she is not responsible for border policy. So Andrea says it was confusing. Why would she be sent to the border if she wasn't meant to be responsible for border policy? Then, of course, there's all kinds of Harris, Elise Stefanik, Republican in the House, created this whole fucking this whole resolution condemning Kamala Harris for the amount of migrants, throwing at her feet, the arrival of new migrants from Haiti and Cuba and Nicaragua, this whole shit. So everything was just ridiculous. Now, final point, and then we'll get to where the Biden administration actually is the worst. But to Kamala's point about investment, that much is true. According to this article, in late November, Harris's national security advisor traveled to Guatemala with a very direct message. The transfer of power could not. Sorry. Okay. So there was Bernardo Arevalo wins in a landslide. Conservatives basically are like, no, he won't. But Kamala comes with this message of, you're going to get investment, but only if you certify your fucking elections and don't prevent someone who is against the conservative right from coming into power. The transfer of power could not be impeded. Since May 2021, Harris had been raising money from the private sector to invest in Central America. The total is now around $5 billion. A lot of that money was at risk if the election went sideways, Zuniga said. Because of her engagement, the administration built credibility with civil society and business leaders. So when the U.S. got in the game on the election matter, we were seen as a credible actor. All of that is very difficult to break down into bite-sized, digestible pieces for the average low-information voter in a general election. But what I take away from that is Kamala Harris actually did some interesting work around root causes. Once again, as someone who's like private sector investment in Latin America, when has that ever gone wrong? Except for when Coca-Cola sends death squads to kill union leaders, and Chiquita Banana, turns all Central American countries into colonies. I understand there's a bad history there, and I'm not saying that this is the way forward. I say you just straight up give them some fucking money? What about just straight up aid and be like, hey, this can't go to the military? But again, you've got to work with, I mean, these are actors you're working with who are like under corruption charges and drug trafficking charges themselves. So, can of worms, difficult situation, but given all that, it seems like Harris did a pretty good job. Didn't do a terrible job. So I just want to give a little bit of context and credit to this issue that I really do care about. That being said, and I don't want to, I've taken too much time with this, so I just want to say, well, fine. I'll just share this next article because I think it's important. But basically, it's important to know all that the Biden administration tried to do and is doing. Forget this new border bill, which is terrible, but to basically continue a lot of Trump's policies, and they've been sued for it. But Biden reversed some of Trump's border policies, including a program that required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico. But they're making even worse now. Anyway, but for more than a year, Biden kept and defended in court Trump's most sweeping restriction, Title 42. So, right, remember, Title 42 enacted because of COVID, because, under a pandemic, we can turn away as many asylum seekers as we want to because they're bringing COVID, even though we're doing a great job spreading it among ourselves. Now, since the Title 42 stuff, there's been a whole lot more. And this is a great piece, and everyone should read it, from immigrantjustice.org. Recycling Trump's asylum bans and expanding Title 42, how Biden's new policies threaten to undermine asylum rights for generations to come. So what they have done is they basically have swapped regular asylum law for what is called parole, and there's a limit of the number of people who can come into this country on any given week, which is 30,000, something like this. And Title 42, expanding it, basically allows them to, certain aspects of Title 42 have gone away, but other aspects of Title 42, which is the right to deport en masse, those have been expanded under the Biden administration. The parole program. So anyway, the parole programs provide the opportunity for people to meet certain criteria to enter the United States, to remain for a limited period of time, and to apply for work authorization. Again, a lot of this is happening through the app. In October of 2022, the Biden administration announced a narrow parole program for Venezuelans who were able to connect with a sponsor in the U.S. and has the financial capacity to secure a passport and fly to the U.S. But the National Immigrant Justice Center and other advocates expressed concerns the Venezuelan parole program excludes more than it protects. On January 5th, the Biden administration announced that this same parole program would be expanded to Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. It's capped at not 30,000 a week, 30,000 parole grants a month divided among Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And they all are generally, a lot of the, more limitations. Most people seeking to apply for these programs have to remain in the dangerous conditions in which they seek to flee, meaning their countries or another country. And in order to be considered, a lot of them have to have applied via a third country. So you can't go direct from your country you're trying to escape to the United States. That means only a privileged few will benefit from the program, despite dire circumstances giving rise to asylum claims in all four nations. The numbers reflect that already. According to the government of Mexico, only 11,460 Venezuelans have been able to enter under the Venezuelan program since October of 2022. Comparatively, nearly 34,000 Venezuelans were processed or expelled at the border in September 2022 alone. Blah, 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 blah. And again, under U.S. and international law, people fleeing from persecution are not required to have a sponsor. They're not required to have any connections to the United States. They don't need a passport. They don't need a plane ticket. That's international law. How do the parole programs relate to Title 22? The Biden administration has paired the new programs with an expansion of Title 42 that, again, expels asylum seekers and gives them more leniency and ability to do that. Blah, 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 blah. So I without getting too into the weeds, I do think it's important to know that, like, there is so much if we're actually talking about border policies, the Biden administration has been incredibly militarized. They have doubled down on what the Trump administration has done. They have already denied asylum, and they're being sued because of the denial of asylum. They're also being sued by Republican governors for trying to limit, the part of the Title 42 that ended was the part about COVID restrictions. Okay, we're not going to accept people because of COVID. The Republican governors are like, oh, we still want that around, even though we think masks are the devil, and COVID is a cold. So that is I'm just putting that there. Now, what's really scary and moving forward, the really important point is Kamala Harris saying, I will not just fight for this bill, I will sign a bipartisan border bill that only gives more funding to the border, more Customs and Border Patrol agents there, and does nothing to actually address some of the root causes, right? It's taking the money we spend at the border and infusing it in programs, right? There are ways. And the problem with the United States is we don't invest in Latin American nations unless it's one, through their military, or two, it's investing in civil society groups that actively support the opposition to a government that we don't like because they're communist or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the only way a Latin American country can get an investment, right? Is when it's like, well, this is going to be undermining Chavismo and socialism in Venezuela. And then it's like, all right, sure. But even that money, there's not a lot of, right? So, but actually just like helping civil society. And you don't even have to do that. You could just be like, hey, let's cut down on the amount of guns that flow from the United States down to Central America. Johan Grillo has said in his books, basically, like, this would do a whole lot to stop the violence in Central America because it would mean there were less guns in Central America, meaning there less, people would not be fleeing for their lives at the hands of drug gangs. So, it's all connected. And I apologize for taking so long about that, but I really think that's an interesting, something to fact check. And now, finally, let us go. Well, before that, two more things, and I promise I'll speak less on it because we got to talk about Gaza, but we got to talk about Kamala Harris was able to escape some of the gotcha questions from Dana Bash about how much she has flip-flopped on her policy. Remember when she was running as in a Democratic primary in 2020 against the likes of Bernie Sanders? She's trying to run as much to the left as she possibly can muster, right? Without being Bernie Sanders. And so Dana Bash is calling her out on fracking. She came out against fracking. She said fracking needs to be banned. Now she's like, no, it doesn't need to be banned. But she's able to skirt this answer by talking about her values and the fact that her values haven't changed. So here's Dana. This is a good question to me. This is like, but the answer is so obvious. It's a rhetorical question. It's like, yeah, the answer is, of course, she's running in a general. Of course, she's throwing her previous self under the bus because she's a politician and she's pivoting.
Speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary?
Yes.
And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed.
Okay, so this I thought was a good answer because unlike Gaza and Palestinians, which we'll get to in a moment, She doesn't throw the Green New Deal under the bus. She's a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And she's walking this tightrope of saying, Biden good, everything Biden does good, but also Green New Deal good. And I'm going to openly misconstrue what the Green New Deal is, which is much more of a massive overhaul of infrastructure, green jobs, moving to renewables as quickly as possible. And I'm going to just sort of, say that we need deadlines to reduce greenhouse gas emissions a little bit, maybe. No, we need deadlines for net zero. We need deadlines to that's the deadline. The deadline isn't deadline to maybe start having a meatless Fridays, no. The deadline is survival or not. But she's able to give this answer of kind of the answer is basically look, my policies have changed because I'm running in a general and my cart is hitched to the most centrist motherfucker, and on a lot of issues. Sorry. But my values haven't changed. Undergirding all of that is me and my values. And this is what I'm telling you when I said at the beginning that we don't know who this person is, that this person is brilliantly evading the ability for us to understand who she is and kind of the perfect strategy to win in a general election. And maybe secretly, she's a fucking Marxist. What if she's a Marxist and did what, Fidel Castro did, and she's like, oh, I'm not a communist. There's no way I would be. That would be terrible. Seizes power. And there's I'm going to nationalize everything and I'm going to spread literacy to the rural areas and everybody rise up and workers' rights. Can we dream? Can we dream? But you know what I'm saying? The best politicians, especially when you're trying to get people's vote, are cagey. There is a point to being cagey. All right? Now, especially when you're a woman, especially when you're a Black woman, you better be cagey, because if you tell people what you really think, they'll be like, you sound aggressive. You know what I'm saying? Not everyone can Bernie Sanders. Not everyone can Trump. Not everyone can do that. But also, maybe not everyone is that. And we don't know who this person is. So, but I like that answer. I like that answer because it doesn't close the door on a Green New Deal as those of us who wake up in the middle of the fucking night and are like, oh my God, will there be a future for my child? Oh my God, we live on a beautiful planet. Why do we dig it up and burn all of the previous, the Paleolithic era? Why do we dig so much? Can we leave the earth alone? Can we just plant? That's just the Pachamama in me speaking, though. All right, let's save the worst for last, because obviously this was the most disappointing answer that Kamala Harris gave, but pretty much the exact answer that we heard at the DNC, and these are her thoughts on
President Biden has
Israel.
tried unsuccessfully to end the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. He's been doing it for months and months.
Oh, hang on. TBD. I mean, not TBD. BT dubs. That's the right acronym. Tip the show, you guys. Send a super chat like Doug over here being so sweet. Like Pawnee gifting a membership, like Jody Odell gifting 10 memberships, because CNN, they are some greedy hoes. And every time they see their footage on anyone else's channel, they're going to demonetize. They're going to copyright strike you. They're going to, whatever, some fuck shit that they're going to do. And the fact that I just swore. So if you like me sailor mouthed and playing you some good CNN clips and giving you the context, just become a patron. Number one, patreon.com/bitchuationroom, but also tip the show as a super chat, super sticker, throw some bits up in Twitch or Venmo or Cash App, TBR-live on Venmo, TBR live on Cash App, because these YouTube hoes ain't loyal. Let's keep going.
Along with you, would you do anything differently? For example, would you withhold some U.S. weapons shipments to Israel? That's what a lot of people on the progressive left want you to do.
Let me be very clear. I am unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to
That sounded like the same thing, but then I was like, okay, defense and its ability to defend it. So that means like, okay, do whatever you want and sell you all the weapons. Okay, I guess it's a different thing. It just sounded like the same thing.
Change. But let's take a step back. October 7, 1,200 people were massacred. Many young people who were simply attending a music festival.
So this is really annoying to me because this is the I condemn Hamas of this genocide that is now 11 months in the making. And you have to talk about October 7th. Never mind the fact that every 10 days on October 7th happens on the people of Gaza. Every 10 days. I've done the math. I've kept up to date with the math. It's every 10 days. And at the end, it might be even less. It might be every week on October 7th happened to the people of Gaza. And yet you don't hear any American politician stopping and saying, yet another milestone, yet another October 7th. So miss me with all this. And by the way, it wasn't 1,200 people. It was something 1,100 and something, okay? The Israeli government keeps on lowering the number of people who were killed. It's still bad. I'm just giving you the facts, though.
Many young people who were simply attending a music festival. Women were horribly raped. As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. We have to get a deal done. This war must end.
In the meantime,
and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out. I've met with the families of the American hostages. Let's get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
but no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Dana, we have to get a deal done. When you look at the significance of this to the families, to the people who are living in that region, a deal is not only the right thing to do to end this war, but will unlock so much of what must happen next. I remain committed since I've been on October 8 to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution, where Israel is secure and in equal measure, the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
Okay. I like this answer a little bit better than I liked her DNC speech. That there's a particular turn of phrase that I actually did like, even though we'll talk about how bad faith all of this is how they do so matters. Israel has a right to defend itself, but how they do so matters. Now, she didn't expand on that. Well, what are you going to do if how they do so is violating international law? I thought you believed in law. Aren't you a law and order effectively and a law and order candidate? But I like that turn of phrase because there's wiggle room in there. There's room for us to push. There's room for us to pressure. There's room for us to call. There's room for us to march. There's room for us to not back down on this issue. So I like that. And obviously, what I didn't like is that there's going to be no change. There's going to be no change. We need a ceasefire deal. And I understand this tightrope she's walking because she doesn't want to undermine what possibly, maybe, definitely is not happening right now, which is a potential ceasefire deal. You guys, look, I mean, call me a negative Nancy. It might not happen. I know there's a pause to vaccinate children from polio, which is great. And then once they're vaccinated, there will continue to be bombs raining down on their homes. And also, who's doing the vaccinations? Do some of the aid workers have security? Do they know that they're not going to be killed when they're trying to vaccinate children from polio? Probably not, because Israel said they're not going to cease operations, but they'll allow these people to go in. Or they will limit it a little bit. But she's absolutely right. I mean, the hostage families are freaking out. They're protesting outside of the border and the entry points into Gaza. I think in a recent protest, they were screaming the names of their loved ones who were taken hostage to see if maybe they could be heard. I mean, real desperate shit, because this government is absolutely buck wild and they don't care. They don't care. They don't care about the hostages. They don't care about a ceasefire. And they sure as shit do not care about a two-state solution. But did I like the lip service around it? Yes. There is some, I think it's important to watch that whole clip, not just that there's not going to be any change. And again, we don't know who this person is. I don't know if she knows who she is, but she's not an ideological Zionist. She's not, again, she wasn't cradled in Golda Meir's bosom, under a parasol in the setting sun, okay? She, they didn't make hummus together by squishing garbanzo beans through their hands, like in the movie Ghost or something, like some weird Ghost reenactment. But Golda Meir and Joe Biden, like, that didn't happen. Like, Joe Biden is a ferocious, committed Zionist. Whatever Israel wants, it can get. Doesn't matter how many people need to die. And thank you, member on YouTube, Lisa French, who says, "What about the West Bank?" Or I think something talking about the West Bank. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get to it today, but this week marks one of the biggest incursions into the West Bank in 50 years. Huge, massive military operations, killing 16 people. And it's just unconscionable once again. And word from those who live in the West Bank are like, we're next. This is going to happen. They're already colonizing our land vis-a-vis settlers who are protected by their military. But now that the actual military is involved, we expect this to get a lot worse, because when you don't fucking rein them in over in the Gaza Strip, what do you think's going to happen? And yes, it can get worse. Look, if Joe Biden was still running, I would tell you straight up, and maybe it is really hard to see daylight between Joe Biden and Donald Trump on this. But when it comes to Kamala Harris, I do think there can be more daylight. There is more daylight. And it is wild to me that we would allow what is happening in the West Bank, well, forget about what's happening in Gaza, but what's happening in the West Bank to be taking place right now, and still seriously talk about a two-state solution. Because what's happening right now basically feels like, what Sheldon Adelson, that rich, disgusting fucking Jabba the Hutt ass Zionist piece of shit, that dude, what his wife, his now widow, would like, which is the recolonization of all of the West Bank. That's apparently what Trump has promised to her in exchange for massive amounts of money that she's giving him. It's already underway. I mean, Trump and Biden in a lot of ways have been sort of like, have like, it's like a game of volleyball. I don't know, I'm like not a sports person, but it's like they've been just set up and just spike, set up, spike, right? Set up, volley, whatever it is, but it's like one of them throws it up and the other one spikes it down. And if we don't change course on this, and thank fuck that Joe Biden is not the nominee, because he was just ready. If he would have won, which I don't think he would have, they're spiking each other's balls here. They're just, and I'm going to end this metaphor because it's belabored and it's upsetting. But I do have to go in a little bit. But I want to wrap this by saying I thought it was an interesting interview. I did have,
And soon, but
and I'll put this up. I did have a lot of problems with the camera work. Having Tim Walz next to Kamala Harris like this, it just looked bad. I kept on thinking, how are they going to set it up? What's the lighting going to be like? And I think about these things because, like, no big deal. But I've been in the field and like I've done these interviews, but terrible. He looks like a giant, and I didn't play any clips from him because he only had like 3 questions. He looks massive, and she looks like she's in like they gave her the small chair, But that's because she's the farthest away. Now, of course, she couldn't be on his side because then they'd just be cross-talking over him and he'd be sitting there, like he's a little kid, not understanding what the big adults are saying. But then I'm thinking like the real setup would have been, sorry, this is so particular, but because he looks like he's like 4 inches taller than, it's like his torso that big? Is he sitting on phone books? What the fuck? The real setup should have been, because they're at a square table, the real setup should have been Bash in the middle, but on the corner. Uncomfortable for Bash, but you got to do that, okay? So I'm just whoever's on the road in the CNN cinematography department, whoever's a DP on this shoot, really fucked it up. I'm just saying, like, Bash got to be on the corner. If you've got a square table, you've got Walz on one side and Kamala on the other, all right? It's a better shot. No one's cross-talking across each other, obviously. And neither of them, no one's farthest from you. And Walz, who was closest, you know what I'm saying? Like it's just simple. It's simple. Very easy to fix. Before we go, I do want to say rest in peace and rest in power to this young Palestinian 19-year-old Medo Halimi, who was murdered by Israel. He was a TikTok social media creator who basically every single video took you inside his life, surviving every single day in Gaza. And he lived on the beach in a tent, and Israel targeted him on the beach. They killed him while he was hanging out with his friends. Because of course they did. Because he was doing all this. He was humanizing Palestinians. You can't do that. That is propaganda in their mind. Or he was secretly Hamas. I mean, I'm still waiting for all the apologies from my liberal Zionist friends. Where are they? Hello? Hello? Oh, do they even follow the news anymore? I don't think so. Yay. Go, Kamala. Shut up about your criticisms. So I really like, this is kind of a video, an example of some of the videos that he would do.
How do we shower? A question that I get a lot. And today I'll be showing you the 2 ways that I use to shower. And of course, there's no shampoo or soap. They're really rare and expensive. Let's get it. First, I fill up a bucket of water, which is not easy to do, by the way. Check out my video on how we get water. Then I get a cup, jar, or whatever thing I can use to pour water with. And I pour it down myself. Now, honestly, the second way is actually a bit more fun. Let me show you. All I have to do is just take a nice swim. Since my tent is very close to the beach, as you can see right across the street, only half a minute walk. You could have guessed I do it a lot. It's my third time swimming today. Because it's been too hot today, so every time I feel a bit sweaty or I don't know, I just go dip myself in there. I come back. And of course, I always escape my reality by watching this beautiful view. How do we shower?
So I cried a lot trying to learn about him and produce this video, but that's where he was killed. He was killed on the beach. The place that he would go for a shower and also for some solace from this never-ending, incessant barbarity that is being rained down upon the people of Gaza. And they killed him. And he had other beautiful videos. He would plant plants, as he would say, because he wanted to plant life and give life in the face of so much death and so much destruction. He explained how he would get money if you ever donate to, and he did have a GoFundMe, but how he would go get his money, and how they would charge him a 40% commission fee to get his money out, how he would charge his phone, how he would so I encourage everyone to go TikTok.com, Medo Halimi, MEDOHALIMY. Just watch his videos. It's just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And yeah, this is why we actually do need to change course. And I don't blame the young people who are watching young TikTok creators like this kid in Gaza who are like, how is Kamala speaking to me and my concerns about seeing genocide every single day? School's about to start in a little bit. Like, we better see something different very soon. And you know what I'm not looking forward to in 10 days is the debate with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, because both of them will be arguing who is more in love with Israel, who has Israel's nuts farther down their throat. I'm so sorry, but it's true. That's all they're going to be doing is arguing about that. That's all they're going to be doing. She's practically a Palestinian. No, I'm not. Palestinians are dirty. Yay. Not looking forward to that part of the debate. But please, thank you. Please and thank you. And just some thanks and some chats. Art Vandalay became a member on YouTube. Again, Jody Odell, what a generous, generous gift. And Gato Man 196, thank you for this. Franny, Biden was being challenged in court by Republican AGs trying to undo the Trump policy. Yeah, exactly. And Sugarfootism, thank you for making it clear about immigration. And Riley Cools on YouTube, not a single word on enabling migrants access to citizenship, nothing on DACA. Yeah, nothing about you're right. The undocumented people already here. What about that? What about the right to travel? What about the right to say, look, if you can go home? Like, it's just so funny to me that, like, we deport en masse, but we don't allow someone who doesn't have citizenship to go home, to go visit. They've been here for 10, 20, 30 years, but they can't ever leave. Like, it just makes no sense. It makes no sense. Because they could never come back. So give them travel rights. Maybe they would choose to stay. Who knows? But again, immigration is so effed in this country. Matt Gates and Wife Lord Bronco, what's up? I haven't seen you in a while. Thank you for your super chat. There's only one insult Trump has not used. It's the N-word. He's already implied Kamala got ahead by her looks. No need to give it a rabid animal a reason to use it. If he uses all of it, MAGA will. Oh, they're using it, I'm sure. I mean, he's retweeting, like, Holocaust denying Nazis on Truth Social, all kinds of misogynistic, disgusting memes and whatnot. Like, they're saying it all the time in the background. And thank you, Pawnee, so much for that gift. Frank Rockefeller says politicians are so dull and vacant, hard to believe they hypnotize the gullible with their nonsense. $35 trillion in debt, government failure. Rockefeller, gonna Rockefeller. Thank you, though. Says government so-called investment, unlike market investment, results in misallocation of resources and $35 trillion in national debt. I'm not as concerned with the national debt as you are. I just am concerned about putting all of that money into, the coffers of a genocidal state. Hev, thank you so much. I contribute because I believe in you, Franny. The bitches in the hilarious chat. I'm sad that I miss a lot of the jokes. I am gonna try and, guys, I promise y'all, if you do watch live, if you listen as a podcast, bless your little heart. I love you. And I love my podcast hoes, most loyal hoes. But I am going to try to do some upgrading of the stream, get some the chat in the actual stream so everyone can see the chat. I think that'd be fun. And Izuri Mirai says Mehdi Hassan and Naomi Klein had a great conversation on Zateo about the ceasefire language, worth checking out. Yes, I'm definitely going to watch that. Benjamin Moral, thanks for being a member, says I come here for sanity. You brought it. Gracias, chica, de nada. And Big Golameo says Situation Room and Bad Hezbollah keep me sane. Thank you so much. You keep me sane. I do feel better after these streams. I hope everyone feels a little bit of catharsis and release, and I like that. Benjamin Moral, free Palestine. If she gets in, we keep fighting. If Dump wins, we fudged. I can't stomp for Kamala, but I know what Dump is. Yeah. And Dave Gleason, welcome to your membership. You should check out all of the bonus episodes. You have a special little playlist accessible to you, as well as the Twitch members have that playlist. Thank you, Charm Chaos says, after spending the majority of this broadcast cleaning up an overflowing toilet, I'm done with international politics. Gross. Grody. Thank you, Robo Blake, for resubscribing. Happy Friday, Franny. Happy Friday to you all. Happy Frantastic Friday. I'm going to be on TYT in a little bit with John and Jenks, so that'll be fun and good, and everybody support the show. And finally, Todd Roy, thank you for your super chat. And Philip Schwartz says maybe we should call oil devil's blood to scare the oil devil's blood to scare the Republicans and religious right from supporting oil drilling. Yeah, I mean, something. I feel like we should do what they did in The Princess Bride with, you know, Andre the Giant, and just like appear as a spirit, you know, but like, don't dig me up like that. I think that's what you're getting onto. Final little note on Todd Roy. Todd Roy is the mod on this YouTube channel. He is the only mod on this YouTube channel, I believe. And he's wonderful. And we all should support Roy, Mr. Roy, that's right. The best Roy child. And I trust his judgment. And so if you acting up or you're commenting a lot and he need to put you in a little timey outie, you're going to go in your timey outie, okay? Respect the Roy. And with that, have a wonderful weekend. Y nos vemos el martes. Bye.